Thank you for that introduction. Thank you, Ravi, Srikant, and Sudhir, and the entire Synera leadership team for inviting me to participate in the Digital Acceleration Summit. Today's theme that I will be discussing is Disrupt Yourself 2.0. As I thought about the topics and how to describe my views around disrupting yourself, there's two key elements that I'd like to share with you today. One is that disruption internally is something that we always need to pursue, both personally and professionally, with our careers and our businesses. Secondly, as CIOs and technology leaders, we have a unique position in being able to advance innovation and drive disruption because of our technology backgrounds. More and more, you see the hyperconvergence that I'm sure you've discussed in your sessions prior to this one, where the lines of business are blurring and technology acceleration is exponentially increasing. And so that puts us as technology leaders in the forefront. And it's a good thing because we have the background. It's also a challenge that we need to continue to strive towards as we become not only technology leaders, but business leaders. So this is a little intro for me and my background for those that don't know me. Just a couple highlights here. One is I've launched my new Twitter handle @TomorrowsCIO. Please feel free to tweet me. Throughout the conversation today, we'll be logging questions. I'll be happy to answer them at the end if there's time. And the other thing, just as I think about my personal journey in the spirit of disrupt yourself, one of the things I challenge myself to do every day is get out of my comfort zone, and particularly around leading the business strategically. And I monitor and kind of reflect on how much I contribute to the business strategy, non-IT topics. As I interact with my peers, I look for that as a sign of my maturity, and I continue to challenge myself to reach new heights. A little background for the group on TracFone. I'm not sure of how much the group really understands about our business, and so just a brief moment on TracFone. The graph that you're seeing there, the blue line, represents the US growth of mobility subscribers. And there's a particular point in the TracFone journey where there was some exponential growth. I'll talk about that in a second. But before the roots of TracFone, we were a startup in 1996. We were purchased by America Mobile, which is the 5th largest carrier in the world, headquartered out of Mexico City in 2000. Then we had a period of exponential growth, as I mentioned, from 2008 to 2010. And that's why I titled this presentation and this conversation, Disrupt Yourself 2.0, because the 1.0 occurred in that range of 2008 and 2010. And the uniqueness of the TracFone journey was a phrase that we used, which is called serving the underserved. And so we were able to serve a portion of the market around low and middle income populations that no one else wanted to serve, and we were able to serve it profitably. And that's what really amounted to that disruption in the 2008 to 2010 timeframe. As you progress forward into 2017, the business started to plateau. Revenue was increasing 1% to 2%, EBITDA around the same range. The business was stalling. At that moment, we brought in a new CEO, Eduardo Cortez, and myself, Jay Smith, the CIO. And what we were able to do in the coming years, year and a half, 2 years, is really add to our journey of disruption and create a sense of urgency in the business that mimicked what the business was able to do in 2008 to 2010. And you see the reference to Disrupt Yourself, the book by Whitney Johnson. This book was something I was able to leverage as I tried to create momentum and a sense of urgency and actually build confidence within the business. And my message was, team, we've done this before. We can do it again. And the concept of going back to a startup, and our mantra is it's an $8 billion startup. And we need to have that same hunger and passion that we had in 1996 when we started the company. We need to have that same passion now, and now we have the benefit of $8 billion of revenue to support our growth. So that's the background I wanted to share with you. If you have more questions on TracFone, happy to answer them offline. So when we talk about the path to disruption, there's 3 key points I want to talk about today that really emphasize my journey at TracFone and the journey of the business. One is disrupting within IT, and I'm going to talk specifically about my journey within IT. I'm also going to talk about some of the lessons learned that I've experienced over my career at TracFone, particularly as it relates to IT. Then there's the disruption of our partner relationships, and it's an evolution of how we think about engaging not only service partners, but hardware and software vendors. And then third, we're going to talk about the ultimate challenge, which is disrupting the business. As you see the planes flying, what is imagined there is all of these 3 are happening in parallel, and they're extremely important to the ultimate goal of achieving the business growth that we set out to achieve. So this is what I call the flywheel. For those of you that have read Good to Great by Jim Collins, the flywheel effect. It's really hard to get the flywheel turning, but once you get it turning, it accelerates exponentially. The interesting lesson learned I had here was I was overly optimistic as I entered in TracFone. I thought I would have this strategic framework in place within the first 90 days. And really, my first day at TracFone, I'd like to tell you a little story about what I encountered. At TracFone, I came in my first day, I was hit with serious customer outages, tens of thousands, some cases hundreds of thousands of customers impacted. And I had to prioritize that as my number one goal, right? I had to increase the stability of our platforms. I had to earn the credibility and trust of my business partners, and I had to do that at a record pace. And so that was the first lesson learned. I think I overestimated how fast I could make an impact. And so I rightly pivoted and adjusted. And so not at 90 days, but at 180 days, I had this strategic framework in place. And so I want to talk a little bit about the framework. And first I want to talk about culture and talent. This is at the heart of everything that we do, and in my experience, the most important thing that you need to get right. When you get this right with both your employees and your consultants, that's when magic happens and the toughest technical or business problems get solved. On the employee side, I'm going to talk a little bit about Agile and our transformation. The Agile transformation for us was less about the ceremonies that I'm sure that many of you know, the Staley stand-ups, the product owner forums, the Scrum of Scrums. It's more about the mindset and the way of thinking. Right? It's more about empowerment and trust and building co-located teams that know that they can solve and make decisions. It's about a servant leadership model that we've put in place where not only the executive team, but everybody in management understands that their job is to remove obstacles for the employees and for our teams. From a vendor perspective, we've reinvented how we work. Not only with services vendors, Sonera being one of our most strategic, taking that from a time and materials to a managed service environment, to a performance incentive environment. That was the first step. The second step is co-investment in innovation, shared revenue models, and other creative ways of mutually aligned incentives for us and our service providers. The other aspect of the vendor relationship that changed massively, we are in a 3-year cloud journey as we speak. We're 2 years in. We have 50% of our workloads running in the public cloud across AWS and Azure. The aspect of the effect of that on typical run and maintain and the traditional hardware and software vendors that make their money off of maintenance was dramatic. And we had to find a win-win, which we were able to do. But it's something that I would leave you with as you're looking at the cloud and as you're looking at that journey, the relationship with your service providers, the software vendors, and hardware maintenance vendors is extremely important. The last piece I'll mention is our digital journey and the digital transformation. As we look at digitizing our business, it's equally important on the customer side, which I think, the majority of companies kind of get that right. employee NPS, Net Promoter Score, for those that aren't familiar. It's particularly relevant in a B2C business like ours with 22 million subscribers. A lot of focus on the customer experience. I think the thing that I would leave you with or ask you to think about is the employee experience tied to the customer experience and the tight relationship of those two. And our focus on the employee has delivered just as much meaningful results to our business as the customer. I failed to mention innovation. I'll save the best for last. This is a relatively recent responsibility that I've been entrusted with. And this is now, within IT, we are responsible for innovation for the company. And the way we think about innovation is innovation as a practice, innovation as a service, and it's us taking a leadership role in driving how you execute innovation, experimentation, prototyping, failing fast and killing ideas right away so you spend as little as possible on the ones that aren't going to work, but expecting failure, because failure is how you learn. So innovation is a mark of maturity as you look at disrupting yourself, both from an IT organization and a business perspective. On this one's particularly interesting to me and has a special place in my heart. So I'm going to talk about two areas. Soldiers to artists. This is a metaphor coined by Safi Patel, Loon Shots, for those that haven't read that book. And it talks about keeping the grit of the soldiers, the tenacity of the soldiers, but giving them the empowerment and the creativity of artists, and having that mix be more and more advantageous for businesses. If you can see the photograph here, there's a couple things I'd mention to you and emphasize. One, first, look at the smiles on people's faces. Look at the fun and the enjoyment you can see that's happening within this group. This is a group of our 30-plus Agile teams, the best Agile teams that we have in the organization. The other thing that I would mention is these are individual contributors talking about the business results that they've delivered, the value creation that they've accomplished, and talking in business terms that they were never afforded the opportunity to do before. The other aspect is there's Eduardo, the CEO. You see me there in the second row. We are there as servant leaders, and we take action items to remove obstacles for the teams. And that's the real meaning of servant leadership. A lot of people want to talk the talk, but when it comes time to walk the walk, that's what we try to do at TracFone. Now, transitioning to the second half of the story in the slide, I want to start with a story. This is something I completely underestimated and a major lesson learned for me, and I think maybe for others in the audience. So I come in, it's in October of 2018. I come in for a normal day. I find a very peculiar letter on my desk, and it was written in block script, the kind of handwriting you look to write when you're trying to hide your handwriting. So I found that peculiar. I opened the letter, and I began to read. And as I read, my heart started to pound because what I read was a death threat. And I'm going to read you a simple quote, just a simple piece of the death threat, but I think it will resonate with you. When you ruin my life, I will have the right to ruin yours. I don't care much about consequences because my life will be destroyed, but I will make sure to ruin yours too. It goes on to specifically mention my family members, my wife, and mention personal things about me that I didn't know people knew. And so as you can imagine, it was a very sobering moment for me, and I had to reflect quickly and decide my path forward. And so after I reflected, I persevered, decided to, with my family, to continue to persevere on my journey. And I'm proud to say that now, 2 years later, I am getting notes and letters and people coming to me with a very different message. And I want to read you one excerpt from that as well. This is from an individual contributor in the IT organization who is a shy person, doesn't talk a lot. Lastly, if it means anything, in all the years I've worked here, which has been a pretty damn long time, me reaching out to a CIO to say thank you is a first. P.S. Remove the others. I'm a private dude and just wanted to say something directly to you. So what I mean in reading those two is the two extremes that I experienced. One, completely underestimating the power of the resistance that I experienced. I anticipated the soldiers to artists. I anticipated the fun atmosphere, the part on the left side. On the right side, I didn't anticipate the strong resistance. So anytime, my message would be anytime you're leading or participating in a business transformation or innovation or disruption, anticipate resistance, plan for it, and manage it proactively. Now we get into the interesting part. This is where I live and breathe. This is where I excel personally. Disrupting the business. And everything else we've talked about are enablers to creating the sense of urgency in the business and then actually being able to help them, guide them, lead them to disruption. And so when you think about our 8 billion to 20 billion 2.0 disruption, we go back to that 2008 to 2010 time and serving the underserved. That continues to be our mantra at TracFone. We are now entering new business verticals, bringing new products and services to market, still under the auspices of serving the underserved and bringing access to those products and services to people that otherwise wouldn't have it. Across the verticals you see there, financial services, healthcare, education, etc. Remember my comment I made about hyperconvergence. In every one of these verticals, technology is accelerating at an exponential pace, and it opens up opportunities for technology professionals and technology companies to create new business models and innovate and disrupt. Massive transformative purpose. That's a concept I'd like to introduce to you if you're not familiar with it. It may be a nugget that you could take away and use within your businesses. The key for a massive transformative purpose, one is that it's grander than any financial objective. So the 8 to 20 billion, although exciting for me as an executive at TracFone, maybe doesn't resonate as well with all of our employee base. And so as we think about a massive transformative purpose, it needs to be about society overall, giving back, making sure that our corporate social responsibility is being managed and delivered on. And so I want to take a moment to read you our MTP, Massive Transformative Purpose. The success criteria of if this is good or not should be that it leaves you with goosebumps. Let's see. For the last 20 years, we connected the people our competition overlooked. We engaged and served the underserved when others would not. Now it's time to create the future for the next generation. At TracFone, we see a future that is far more complex, a future where constant mobility is required to live and compete, a future where connectivity is as vital as air. So no matter who you are, how you live, or where you want to go in this world, we promise to be there, powering your journey without fail every moment of every day, delivering coverage and access for all. And so as you think about that message I just read, think about the society impact, serving the underserved, the connection to our core, and this is something that has resonated with every employee and brings meaning to why we want to achieve the 8 to 20 billion growth is because there's a society impact that's extremely positive right along with it. One other mention before we go to the next slide, there's a leadership book that I would like to call out, and that is The Infinite Game from Simon Sinek. This is a book that talks about business being infinite, and it describes in contrast to a lot of the sports analogies where you have a quarter or you have 4 quarters and you have an end to the game and you have a winner and a loser. This leadership principle is about being relevant and staying relevant. And the way you do that is evolve. The way you do that is disrupt yourself. And so hopefully you're seeing a collection of points start to come together in the message around how we think about disruption at TracFone and how I personally have gone through my journey. In summary, I'd like to give you So we spoke about the three things that really portray disruption from TracFone's perspective. We talked about the ability to disrupt IT, the ability to disrupt and realign vendor and partner relationships, and ultimately the holy grail, disrupting the business and putting us on a trajectory of 2.5xing the business in 5 years. So that 8 to 20, 2.5 times. By the end of 2024, we will achieve the goal. A key metric that helps you realize your maturity in innovation and disruption is the velocity of ideas. And it's not just the velocity of successful ideas. Remember, I mentioned failing fast and having the trust in each other, business and IT, executives, peers, you name it. There needs to be an expectation that you will fail, and that's how you learn. And building trust helps you increase your velocity of delivery of new products and services to the market. You see here on this slide several that we're actively working on. I'd also like to leave you a story. I won't be specific because this is sensitive, but I will describe a story of a recent press article that was released about TracFone. We did a market experiment. We talked about a test of a very interesting technology that we ultimately believe one day will come to fruition. But all it was a test. And we got a response from the press that was extremely interesting, right? Provoking. And the takeaway is my boss had my back. We were able to continue. There was no conversation other than this is how you need to act as a company that embodies and embraces innovation. Keep your eyes out for Smart Sim. I'll leave it at that. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Feel free to tweet me at tomorrow's CIO. I'm going to look at my phone here and see if there are any questions. Here's a question. How have you changed your vendor relationship? What changed? And so what I would say is, typically, you see a lot of traditional IT organizations and traditional companies engaging services vendors in a time and materials way where there's really no interest other than billable hours. And so we completely and immediately transition that to shared incentives, as I mentioned earlier, performance-based incentives, and even co-investment in ideas with revenue share opportunities. On the software and hardware maintenance front, it was much different. And with the likes of the IBMs, the Oracles, the SAPs, et cetera, much harder challenge, but we're able to get to the win-win. And I think that's a key element to any partner-vendor-customer relationship, is finding the win-win where the customer can maintain their profitability. We obviously need to do what's right for our business. I'm going to look at another one here. Okay, so there's a question about employees and employee NPS. I think we've done something at TracFone very innovative around employees. I mentioned the focus on employees, but what I didn't mention was that we actually have an employee NPS. And for those, most of you, I'm assuming, are familiar with Net Promoter Score. It's something typically tied to customers. We actually bonus all managers in the company based on what their employees think about them. And there's really one major question. How likely are you to recommend a friend or colleague looking for a job to TracFone? Okay? And so that's a pretty powerful concept that completely reverses the manager-employee relationship. One again, vulnerable moment that I had that I'll share with the group. I had a town hall meeting, 600 people, right? 300 employees, 300 consultants, people from around the world with collaboration technology. And I wanted to know the employee NPS. And I thought I knew more and better. And so I said, let's do a live employee NPS right now. And we used an app that allowed our employees to vote on that single question. 10 being very likely, 1 being not likely at all. And you guys know with the NPS calculation, you throw out the neutrals. Let me just tell you, the NPS score I expected to see versus what I saw was not what I thought. This was in November of 2018 after we had made a number of employee moves that were needed, and I expected to be the hero, but in fact, I was the villain. And so my message in sharing that is that no one's perfect, and as you grow and you disrupt yourself, be vulnerable, be humble, and be willing to talk and learn about the things you've done well and the mistakes you've made. That's how we all improve. I believe there's one more question. So how is your relationship with Synera, and what's the value add? So my relationship with Synera goes back, 3 decades, not to show my age, but yes. And it started off with Ravi and I working side by side in technical roles in Chicago for a startup named Starbelly. Very interesting story. I'll tell you more about that later. But it's grown throughout the 3 decades to be extremely strategic, and it's based on trust. It's based on delivery. It's based on results. He's my friend, but he doesn't get a pass for that, right? We have to deliver, and he's probably smiling now. I wish I could see him. So that was the end of that question. I think we're out of time, so I'm going to pass it back over to moderator. I'd like to just thank everybody that is in the audience that have listened to me today. Please stay in touch with me via LinkedIn. TracFone. We have fun. We play hard. We work hard. Stay in touch. Love to interact with you more. Back over to you, moderator.